China is an ambitious power, looking to become the dominant force in its region. However, Beijing faces significant obstacles, such as trade containment through key choke points and the reality that despite its military advancements, it still can't match the United States in direct confrontation. As a result, Chinese policymakers have had to think outside the box to increase their influence, often resorting to less than transparent methods. In today's video, we'll uncover some of these covert tactics China uses to sway its neighbors and extend its reach, including the surprising connections between the Communist Party of China and organized crime. How deep do these connections run? How are they entwined with China's official power structures, such as the controversial overseas police stations? Let's dive in. First, we need to start in China itself. Beijing rarely takes action against the upper echelons of its transnational criminal organizations. The Chinese authorities only tend to notice them when the organized crime kingpins send a lot of money outside of China or act against the Communist Party's interests to hold on to power. Indeed, many of the high-level organized criminals have official or semi-official posts within the party, especially when it comes to organizations tasked with increasing its influence abroad, as we shall see. In this regard, China resembles its troublesome ally North Korea, which acts as a state sponsor of organized crime through its Bureau 39. Like the North Koreans, Beijing has unofficially sponsored criminal enterprises ranging from drug and human trafficking to money laundering, and the target countries are often some of the most geopolitically important in the Indo-Pacific region. Fiji has proven one of the hotspots for China's state-sponsored criminality. For Beijing, building influence here is geopolitically vital. The nation is located toward the southern end of the Third Island chain, which stretches from the Aleutian Islands in Alaska to New Zealand. Fiji's position is vital for Australia in particular, as control over it could threaten the trade routes between it and the United States. One of China's underhanded ways of asserting its power around the region and wider world is through the opening of its police stations in other countries. Some countries have willingly signed onto agreements to allow China's police to have a presence on their soil. Fiji is one such country. In 2011, when under military rule from a 2006 coup which China supported, it signed an agreement that permitted its police officers to receive training in China. In turn, Chinese police would be embedded with their Fijian counterparts. Fiji would also buy high-tech surveillance equipment from China, like drones, under this agreement. Military rule in Fiji ended in 2014, but the agreement with China remained in place, meaning that there were a lot of Chinese police officers in the country. In 2017, the most famous example of China's use of law enforcement power in Fijian territory occurred. Chinese police, without consulting their Fijian counterparts, arrested a gang of 77 cybercriminals based there. These people were Chinese expatriates. The Chinese cops then flew them back to China, despite there being no extradition treaty in place between it and Fiji. The crimes took place on Fiji's soil, but there were no legal procedures. The Chinese police swooped in unilaterally and deported the criminals under their own authority. In 2023, as one of his first acts in office, Fijian Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka suspended the policing agreement, and on March 28, 2024, he ordered all Chinese police officers to leave the country. The 2017 incident had not been forgotten. Similar policing agreements are in place between China and other countries in the region. For example, under a Memorandum of Understanding with the Solomon Islands, Chinese police forces can help the government there deal with internal unrest. The Solomon Islands are also part of the Third Island chain and could act as a staging point for China to threaten trade between Australia and the United States, just as Japan tried to do in World War II. In May 2023, Taiwan's National Security Bureau claimed it had identified over 100 Chinese police stations around the world. Some of these were based in restaurants, convenience stores, and even private homes. When put under scrutiny, Beijing has claimed that these stations are only there to help its nationals handle travel documents. Their real purposes have been far less benign. One of these is to monitor and police China's overseas community. These police stations allow China to gather intelligence and undermine the monopoly of other sovereign states on the legitimized use of force, as it did in the case of Fiji. China's use of law enforcement to increase its influence might be troubling, but it's still a legitimate function of state power. But China has other methods. Sponsoring organized crime is one of those methods. Australian intelligence and law enforcement sources have observed other sorts of Chinese activity in Fiji. Zhao Fugang is one of the more prominent Chinese expatriates living in that country. He does not hold an official diplomatic post. He is a businessman whose interests span fields ranging from property development to tourism. Unofficially, he is Beijing's most influential agent in Fiji, promoting economic and soft power ties between the two countries. His ties to the Communist Party of China are deep. Although he does not have diplomatic credentials, he has held positions in organizations under the umbrella of the United Front Work Department. This branch of the party attempts to use China's overseas community to foster ties with local governments and businesses in a way that benefits Beijing's national interests. However, there is another side to China's top man in Fiji. According to the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, Zhao is a priority organization target. This designation officially considers him as one of Australia's most serious crime threats, and he has been accused of involvement in organized criminal enterprises ranging from trafficking in narcotics and people, money laundering, and migration fraud. Australian authorities allege Zhao to be one of the senior organized crime figures in the South Pacific. In this framework, Zhao uses Fiji, which hosts the largest airports and ports in the region, as a base of operations to facilitate the shipment of large quantities of drugs into Australia. Australian law enforcement sources believe he has been involved in this trade since at least 2004. Zhao has never been criminally charged. The designation of a priority organization target only means that Australian authorities have good reason to suspect he might be involved in such activities. The United States, too, has reasons to suspect Zhao is an organized crime figure using Fiji as a hub for his syndicate's activities. If this picture is true, Zhao's case is far from the only example of China's use of organized crime as an arm of the state. Organized crime activities have been one of North Korea's go-to methods of making the money it needs to keep the regime afloat. Under crippling sanctions and with poor economic infrastructure, it's had little choice. But despite being the second largest economy in the world, China seems to be okay with letting its nationals get in on the act too. China's de facto partnership with the Mexican drug cartels is well known. In this arrangement, China largely turns a blind eye to its domestic fentanyl manufacturers, who ship the components to the Mexican cartels, which are then refined into the finished product and shipped into the United States. This trade serves as a convenient item of Chinese foreign policy. China may not be able to confront the United States in a direct military showdown, but it can force America to spend more resources on the public health emergency that fentanyl has created. However, the South Pacific has also quietly become one of the world's biggest narcotics hotspots, and China has been keen to get in on the action to increase its influence. Fiji has become a major hub for meth and cocaine. The rise of the drug trade in the last few years has taken the Fijian authorities by surprise. Unprepared, they're now playing catch-up. Fijian Home Affairs and Immigration Minister Pio Tikoduadua confirmed that he had seen the Australian intelligence about Zhao and that it had raised serious concerns about his activities in the country. Combating Fiji's emergence as a hub of the regional drug trade has been one of his highest priorities. When speaking to Australian television, Tikoduadua said that the narcotics were not produced on Fijian soil. It was an international syndicate with many players involved, standing behind the curtain, maybe the big ones. Everybody knew what he meant by that. Fiji has partnered with Australia in intelligence and material support to combat the drug trade within its borders. With limited resources, it's had little choice. China has sponsored the drug trade bound for Australia for the same reason it has concluded a de facto partnership with the Mexican drug cartels. In the Pacific, it wants to harm and exercise leverage over Australia, the destination country of the drugs coming out of Fiji. It seeks to replicate the success of its strategy of sending fentanyl into the United States. Organized crime is the only way to do this. Experts have long held that one of China's unofficial policies is to use patriotic, organized crime figures abroad to advance its interests. The criminals are convenient cat's paws who can get their hands dirty in influence-building operations so that figures attached to the official mechanisms of state power need not. It would be a problem for Beijing if its ambassador to Fiji, Zhang Ping, was accused of being involved in drug trafficking. It's much less of a problem if somebody like Zhao Fugang is involved. He is close enough to act as an agent capable of advancing China's interests in a systematic way, but far enough away that Beijing has deniability if his activities put him in too much legal jeopardy. This policy extends beyond Fiji and extends to the Pacific as a whole. The region has become a drug highway that sees drugs manufactured in Asia and even the Americas transit to their ultimate destinations, Australia and New Zealand. Chinese organized crime groups have also established casinos in the North Pacific. These casinos act as money laundering fronts to assist the movement of drugs through the region to their destinations. Chinese organized criminal groups may be acting in cooperation with their counterparts in the New World, as the Mexican cartels have increasingly viewed the Pacific as an area to do business in, hoping to take advantage of the growing demand for narcotics in Australia and New Zealand. Since Chinese criminal groups already have ties with the Mexican cartels, them cooperating in this region would not be surprising. But it's not just drugs. Chinese organized crime syndicates have looked for other ways to get their foothold in the region too, all while fostering ties between cooperating locals and the Communist Party. Palau is another important country in the region that's in the second island chain, which starts in Japan and ends in Indonesia and New Guinea. China has tried to court the country through official channels, but with little success due to its deep ties to Washington. Palau uses the dollar and was once administered by the United States. It's one of the few countries that still recognize Taiwan over the mainland, so perhaps unsurprisingly, Chinese organized crime networks have infiltrated the country to create a network of influence that official methods have been unable to. In 2018 and 2019, hundreds of Chinese expatriates arrived in Palau at once. These people weren't tourists. Instead, they were part of an online illegal gambling operation, much like the one in Fiji. On the last day of 2019, Palau's police arrested 165 Chinese expatriates. The case proved so overwhelming for the small capacity of Palau's authorities and usual methods of tackling crime that it had no choice but to deport the Chinese nationals to their homeland. A raid in 2010 brought in a smaller haul. Some of these workers were held in debt bondage, and some entered Palau by way of Cambodia, which has become a hub of human trafficking for Chinese organized criminal organizations. One of the buildings in the gambling den was leased by a company partly owned by Tian Hang, who also goes by the name Hunter Tian. Tian owns hotels in Palau and is well regarded by some of the country's elite. Tian also has ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Chinese sources cited him as the head of the Palau Overseas Chinese Federation. This organization has a goal of bringing Chinese nationals in Palau under the cohesive umbrella of the Communist Party. Tian was also invited to attend an event at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing to celebrate 70 years of Communist Party rule. Tian was never charged for involvement in the gambling den. However, the illegal gambling operation in Palau was just one manifestation of a network spanning Chinese businesses and organized crime. There are other Chinese business owners with ties to the Communist Party in Palau, some of them being known organized criminals. Of particular interest to Palau's authorities is a Chinese citizen named Wan Kwok Koi, also known as Broken Tooth. He was the head of the 14K triad in Macau in the 1990s, but was imprisoned on charges of loan sharking, illegal weapons possession, and membership in an organized crime group. He was released in 2012 and took on a new identity, that of a loyalist to China's Communist Party, all conveniently without renouncing his triad ties. Like Zhao, he is part of China's United Front. The United States has sanctioned him and his Cambodia-based group, the World Hongmen History and Culture Association. The very name Hongmen has deep triad ties stretching back for centuries. Wan's first known arrival in Palau came in 2018. On one occasion, he was even considered a guest of the government. Known associates in Palau included Timothy Sinsak, Palau's postmaster general at the time, and the then governor of the state of Arai, Temewang Rengelbai. Both signed on as directors of Wan's Hongmen Association, which proposed the creation of a special economic zone that would include a casino resort featuring Hongmen-branded cigarettes and alcohol and a payment system using a cryptocurrency called Hongcoin. The proposed location of this special economic zone gave the best clue about the geopolitical intentions behind the idea. The desired area was on the southern island of Anggua. This area is sparsely populated, so unless Wan was expecting a tourist boom, it wasn't an ideal location for a casino. It was an ideal place to keep an eye on American military activities though, as the United States made plans to use it as a base for part of a radar installation to counter China's activities in the region. Wan's plans never came to fruition. However, the unofficial sponsorship of organized crime on the part of Beijing is having success in other ways. The growing network of organized crime in the Pacific has created local illicit enterprises. Criminal networks are blossoming in Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Tonga, the Marshall Islands, and the Northern Marianas. The presence of these new criminal organizations gives China another method to influence the region. The local networks have ties with the Chinese transnational criminal organizations such as the aforementioned 14K triad. The Chinese TCOs have influence over the local criminal enterprises, and since Beijing has influence over the TCOs, this growing indirect channel gives it more options to exercise power in the region. Back in Fiji, when Australian media asked if Zhao worked on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party, he answered, yes. Even though he's far away from the official diplomatic levers of China in Fiji, Zhao being accused of acting as a senior figure in organized crime risks the loss of a valuable player for Beijing in this vital region, and it's not keen to let him go so easily. The Chinese embassy in Fiji refused to speak about Zhao. Conveniently, it's said that because Zhao is a naturalized citizen of Fiji, all questions about him should be directed to the local authorities. Nevertheless, China also vowed to protect its national interests overseas when its spokesman mentioned Zhao. The presence of Chinese police forces in other countries can therefore be seen as a supplement to the alleged organized criminal activities. If Chinese police forces become well established within the borders of a foreign country, as they once had in Fiji and have become in the Solomon Islands, it is but a short leap to lend a convenient shield for organized crime figures from local prosecution. Just as China flew the gang of cybercriminals from Fiji to its territory in 2017 without consultation from the local authorities, it could do the same for people like Zhao, should they ever find themselves in legal hot water in their countries of residence. Indeed, the ties between China's overseas police stations and organized crime have already become apparent in Italy. As early as 2010, Chinese organized crime made itself known there, with a clash between rival gangs leading to murder via machete. In March 2022, Fuzhou Police Overseas Service Station opened in Prato. Zheng Wenhua was one of the leaders pictured during the announcement. Zheng was charged in 2018 with having a prominent role in gambling and prostitution dens. Yet he is still prominent among Chinese civic organizations in Italy, including the organization in the building where the police station in Prato was opened. The operations in Italy serve as a template for how China intends to use its relationship with organized crime to influence the much less powerful islands in the Pacific. China may also be gambling that its reach in Fiji is too strong to break so easily. Despite Tico Duardo's insistence that combating the drug trade was one of his top priorities, he was hesitant to take concrete action against Zhao. He even reinstated the policing agreement that Rabuga had suspended the previous year. The Home Minister likely sees no choice. He has to forge partnerships with more powerful countries that can help his small nation deal with the organized crime problem. Small powers caught in the game of empires between great powers have been faced with similar dilemmas all throughout history. This time, conveniently, China gets to be at the table for providing a solution to a problem it likely helped to create. Necessity is the mother of invention, and since China aspires to greater power, it's necessary for Beijing to mitigate the disadvantages it's under with traditional methods of statecraft, like military power and cultural influence. China has therefore been inventive, even enlisting the help of its centuries-old triads for new purposes. The triads originated out of secret societies in the 17th century. These societies intended to overthrow the newly established Qing dynasty and restore the previous Ming. These once problematic organizations have been enlisted for new and inventive purposes by the current rulers of China. The triads are no longer a secret society. They operate in the open, with quasi-official sponsorship from the state. With their ties to China's police stations overseas, it's sometimes easy to see them as one and the same. What do you think about China's use of organized criminal enterprises as a mechanism of statecraft? What countries and activities might be next on its agenda? Don't forget to let us know in the comments. Also, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more military analysis from military experts. Now go and check out how the Philippines became key to US Pacific strategy, or click this other video instead.